Okay, so let's turn to 2 Samuel chapter 8. And we'll have we'll have a prayer and then we'll get going. Father God, thank you tonight for the opportunity to be here. We're grateful for your word and how attainable it is, easily within our grasp. What's not so easy is for us to grasp the truths that you hold in this, the language barriers. So I pray tonight as we look into this word that your Holy Spirit would have an opportunity to speak to us, clarifying and revealing things to us that help us not just understand the text, but understand how it applies to our life. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay. So, last week we were just going through this journey about how David was changing. And one of the things that it says here was that in verse 3, David defeated Hadadezer, the son of Rahab, king of Zobah. And Zobah was a pretty impressive kingdom. 1,700 horsemen, 20,000 foot soldiers. So if you've got 2 men per chariot, how many chariots? 1,700. 3,400? Nice. 3,400 chariots. That's a lot of chariots. And he only kept 100. So, not greedy. But the thing is, way back, one of the things that God said about when the kings of Israel came, they weren't supposed to do what? They weren't supposed to collect horses. And chariots were like the Sherman tanks.
Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
I think it was not root for the lions, but I'm not positive.
Don't marry a Canaanite woman. That's what it was.
So we got... So anyways, David keeps the horses, and it mentions in verse 3 that God delivered them into his hand.
My version says that he hamstrung all but 100 of the horses.
Does that mean he kept them?
Well,
They were useless?
he reserved enough of the good horses for 100 chariots. So he had 200 horses. Of course, got rid of all the horsemen, didn't need them because he had his own drivers. So then, even though he does that, and he's not supposed to, interestingly, in Psalm chapter 20 and verse 7, David, writing this psalm, says, "Some boast in chariots and some in horses, but we will boast in the name of the Lord our God." And looking through verses 7 through 12, it gives us a list of all of the things that he saved, collected. And what do you suppose he had in mind when he took all these spoils, all of this good stuff? Yes, he was going to put them in the temple. And so that makes it okay. Yeah, I mean, you're going to do things like that. And so he had his moments when he was really walking with the Lord. And then he has these moments when he's just unbelievably vicious. But what happens when you allow the flesh to live in your life? And you might think that as long as you've been a Christian, as long as you've been in the church, the flesh might just have this much in your life. But what happens when you just leave that much? Yeah. Once all he needs is that foothold, and he is so aggressive. Satan, I'm talking about. He doesn't get discouraged. He just continues to hammer and hammer and hammer. And just like cancer, that sin grows back. And it just keeps building. Brian?
Yeah, they went way bad. I mean, they were worse than the people around them.
Yeah.
And that's with Christians too. When Christians backslide, you figure you're used to having fellowship with God and communing with the Lord, and now you turn your back away from Him, and you're trying to fill a mighty big hole with the flesh.
Yeah.
You're worse than, you can't do it.
Yeah.
You're miserable. And, yeah.
When Jesus came to the pool of Bethesda and healed that man that wasn't able to walk, he said, "Go and sin no more, lest a worse thing happens." And that's right along what you're talking about. When we, and this is what's happening to David. He's beginning to slip. And one of the things, look at verse 13 of chapter 8. And we see this all the time in our own culture, even today in 2025. David made a name for himself. What happens when we begin to think, God's pretty lucky to have me? Yeah. We begin to think we're something. And God says, no, you're not. I'm something. God says, you're nothing. I'm something. Listen, I can make a donkey talk. So just because you can say something about me, that doesn't mean anything. He said, I can raise up sons of Abraham from stones. You're nothing. I'm something. And man, when we forget that, he reminds us. He reminds us. And he goes down, he hears something about the Valley of Salt, and he goes down there, kills 18,000. And then this is part of Edom. Turn over to 1 Kings, and it's buried in there. It took me a really long time to find it. 1 Kings chapter 11. And verses 15 and 16. Tom, would you read that?
Sure. Earlier, when David was fighting with Edom, Joab, the commander of his army, who had gone up to bury the dead, had struck down all the men of Edom. Joab and all Israelites stayed there for 6 months until they had destroyed all the men of Edom.
Yeah, David had this desire to kill every single male that was an Edomite. And the problem with that, turn over to Deuteronomy chapter 23. Verse 7. Read that, Matt.
You shall not detest an Edomite, for he is your brother. You shall not detest an Egyptian, because you were an alien in his land.
Now, this is just before Moses has given them these last-minute instructions, final farewell, and he's telling them that when you get into the promised land, one of the things they don't want you to do is attack the Edomites, because they came from your loins. Jacob and Esau, twins. That doesn't get much closer. And the Edomites came from Esau. God says, I don't want you to do that. But see, David has reached a point where he's made a name for himself. He says, I pretty much can do anything I want, because I do. And God blesses me. So I think I'm going to kill all the Edomites. And then the last thing I want you to see in chapter 8 before we go on. He has Joab as his right-hand man. And it's understandable because Joab was David's nephew. But he was bad. He murdered Abner in cold blood. He's going to be the one that's going to kill Uriah. He was ruthless, totally immoral, and even David says that he was afraid of him. Now that says a lot, because David was afraid of nobody. Joab? I didn't get that far. You're always asking things I haven't studied for. Wow. Yeah. Just like a hangnail, you know, you go to cut that thing off, and oh man, all of a sudden it's bleeding, and then you're really hurt, and you say, why did I do that? Okay. No, I'm not kidding. I'm not trying to get rid of you. That was a compliment. Okay, let's go to chapter 9. I mean, here we're still, I don't want you to lose sight. We're still talking about David. He's done some good things, but then he does some really bad things. And when we allow the flesh to live in our life, slowly but surely, and Satan is just working day and night on this, because what he's trying to do, he's trying to put a veil over our eyes, even the eyes of a Christian. He's trying to put a veil over our eyes so we don't see clearly. And so, Tim, would you read chapter 9, verses 1 through 8?
David asked, "Is there anyone still left of the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake?" Now there was a servant of Saul's household named Ziba. They summoned him to appear before David, and the king said to him, "Are you Ziba?" "At your service," he replied. The king asked, "Is there no one still alive from the house of Saul to whom I can show God's kindness?" Ziba answered the king, "There is still a son of Jonathan. He is lame in both feet." "Where is he?" the king asked. Ziba answered, "He is at the house of Machir, son of Amiel, in Lo-debar." So King David had brought him from Lo-debar, from the house of Machir, son of Amiel. When Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David. He bowed down to pay him honor. David said, Mephibosheth, at your service, he replied.
Mephibosheth.
Don't be afraid, David said to him, for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always eat at my table. Mephibosheth bowed down and said, what is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me?
Yes. I read that part about Lo-Debar. Lo-Debar. You know, before the crowbar was invented, crows stayed home and drank. Yeah. Yeah. The crowbar. So, verse 3 and then down in verse 13, it's mentioned that he is lame in both feet. And we know from Hebrew poetry, when they mention something twice, it's a point of emphasis. That's what they want to have us zoom in on. So, Marissa, would you read in chapter 9, verses 9 through 13?
Sure. Then the king summoned Ziba, Saul's servant, and said to him, I have given your master's grandson everything that belonged to Saul and his family. You and your sons and your servants are to farm the land for him and bring in the crops, so that your master's grandson may be provided for. And Mephibosheth, grandson of your master, will always eat at my table. Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. Then Ziba said to the king, your servant will do whatever my lord the king commands his servant to do. So, ate at David's table like one of the king's sons. Okay, let's try this again. Mephibosheth? Sounds good, right? Had a young son named Micah, and all the members of Ziba's household were servants of him. And he lived in Jerusalem because he always ate at the king's table, and he was crippled in both feet.
Yes. Sunday school, because we sanitize everything, Sunday school makes this sound like David did a magnanimous thing. When you compare what Jonathan did for David, how does what David did for Mephibosheth compare? Yeah, but what did Jonathan give to David? Yes. He gave up the throne. What did David give up? Food. Even when he said, I'm giving back your land, David couldn't give that back. God had already said through Joshua, when you go into the land, I'm dividing up by tribes. David makes it sound good, but it wasn't his to give. It was already Saul's, and that was his grandpa. So it was his. But, you know, and what did it cost David to bring him into a court? He's lame in both feet. He's not going to coordinate a coup, take over. He can't walk. But the one thing that I think made an impression on David is whenever they gathered around the table, there was a unmistakable sound as Mephibosheth made his way. You could hear the thumping of the crutch or the cane or his body coming across that floor, coming to the king's table. And what I love about that picture is every Sunday when we come to the king's table, we should realize that what God hears is the sounds of cripples coming to gather there, because we're all cripples. He was a type of Christ, and that's what makes this whole scenario difficult, because, and he didn't know, David didn't understand this, that he was a prototype of the Messiah. But, yeah. It pales in comparison to what Jonathan had done for David. But this hardening is beginning to set in, and Ziba's a bad boy. Now you remember, we're getting ahead of ourselves here, but when Absalom takes over and chases David away, Mephibosheth wanted to come with David. And David said, no, you're a cripple. Stay here. So he did. And we find out later that he didn't shave, he didn't cut his fingernails or his toenails, his beard. But Ziba comes to Dave and says, I don't know where Mephibosheth is. He was supposed to be here. And when David asked him about it, he said, I had ordered for my horse to be saddled, but it never was. And he had to have that horse to get there. So Ziba lies, and at the end, even though David finds out that Ziba was lying, now he gives half of Saul's land to Ziba. And that's criminal, because Ziba's not related. So, anyways, next up, chapter 10. Tom, would you read verses 1 through 5?
The king of the Ammonites died, and his son Hanun succeeded him as king. David thought, I will show kindness to Hanun, the son of Nahash, just as his father showed kindness to me. So David sent a delegation to express his sympathy to Hanun concerning his father. When David's men came up to the land of the Ammonites commanders said to Hanun, their lord, do you think David is honoring your father by sending envoys to you to express sympathy? Hasn't David sent them to you only to explore the city and spy it out and overthrow it? So Hanun seized David's envoys, shaved off half of each man's beard, and cut off their garments at the buttocks, and sent them away. When David was told about this, he sent messengers to meet the men, for they were greatly humiliated. The king said, stay at Jericho till your beards have grown, and then come back.
Okay. Ammon and Moab were relatives. And what he's talking about, Nahash, we get confused by these names because Nahash is like calling an Egyptian pharaoh. It was a title. There was a lot of Nahashes. They were the king of the Ammonites, like Pharaoh was the king of Egypt. Yeah. Make sense? Nahash isn't the name, it's the title. So, the king that died was a friend of David's, because when Saul was after him, David took his parents and brought him over to the land of Moab, and Nahash, the king of the Ammonites, watched over them. So they were friends. When he dies, David wants to send an expression of sorrow, and so he sends the servants. Hanan, oh man, if your name starts with an H in the Bible, you're a bad, bad man. Hanan, he's bad. And he says, these servants of David, they've not come to pay the respects. They're spies. They just come to spy out the land. Man, send them packing. And so not only do they send them packing, but they do something in that culture that was just awful. They shaved off just half of their beard. And they took great pride in their beards, not cutting. And then they cut off their garment so it come to where a lot of girls' dresses today come to. I mean, it's just, you see these young girls getting ready to go to homecoming or prom or whatever it is, and wow, there's just not any material. So that's where David's servants, they were wearing the style. They could have gone to the prom. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, good point. Yeah, these men were ashamed. And look at verse 5. And you know there's going to be trouble, because one of the worst things you can do is embarrass David or insult him. And they figured this out. Absolutely. Charlie, would you read verses 6 through 8?
When the people of Ammon saw that they had made themselves repulsive to David, the people of Ammon sent and hired the Syrians of Betham and Rehob and the Syrians of Zobah, 20,000 foot soldiers, and from the king of Makkah 1,000 men, and from the Ishtab 12,000 men. Now when David heard of it, he sent Joab and all the army of the mighty men. Then the people of Ammon came out of them, put themselves in battle array at the entrance of the gate, and the Syrians of Zobah, Beth, Zobah, Ishtab, and Makkah were by themselves in the field.
And Jenny, would you read 9 through 14?
Joab saw that there were battle lines in front of him and behind him. So he selected some from the best troops in Israel and deployed them against the Arameans. He put the rest of the men under the command of Ashbishah, his brother, and deployed them against the Amorites. Joab said, "If the Arameans are too strong for me, then you are to come to rescue. But if the Ammonites are too strong for you, then I will come to rescue you. Be strong and let us fight bravely for our people and the cities of our God. The Lord will do what is good in his sight." Then Joab and the troops with him advanced the fight of the Arameans, and they fled before him. When the Amorites realized that the Arameans were fleeing and fled before Ashbishah and went inside the city, so Joab returned from fighting the Amorites and came to Jerusalem.
Yes, so the Syrians come and they split their forces so that they can flank the Israelites. Joab. He's a naughty, naughty boy, but he's a great military genius. And he said, no, they're not going to flank us because we're going to put a section here, we're going to put a section here. And if one side is getting whooped, then we'll come over and help you. There's no danger of that because David sent the mighty men. Man, those guys were just, there's no battle. It went through them like butter. Got your reading glasses on, Brian? Okay, read 15 through 19.
Can I read 13 too?
Yeah, you can.
All right, thanks. No, I'm sorry, up a little bit. And be of good courage, and let us be courageous for our people and for the cities of our God. And may the Lord do what seems good to him. That's a great line, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, that's putting credit where it goes.
Yeah. Okay, so where am I at, 15?
Yeah.
I've got to find it. And when the Syrians saw that they had been defeated by Israel, they gathered themselves together, and Hadazer sent and brought out the Syrians who were beyond the Euphrates. They came to Halam with Sobach, the commander of the army of Hadazer, at their head. And when it was told David, he gathered all Israel together across the Jordan and came to Halam. The Syrians arrayed themselves against David and fought with him, and the Syrians fled before Israel, and David killed the Syrians, the men of 700 chariots and 40,000 horsemen, and wounded Shobach, the commander of their army, so that he died there. And when all the kings who were servants of Hadazer saw that they had been defeated by Israel, they made peace with Israel and became subject to them. So the Syrians were afraid to save the Ammonites anymore.
Oh. The Syrians were mercenaries. Okay, so they just fought for whoever paid them. They were hired for their military expertise, not their brains. And when some of the Syrians get beat, Hadadezer, he says, hey, you Syrians on the other side of the Jordan, come and help us and we'll pay you. And they said, all right. Who are we fighting against? Oh, it doesn't matter. So David, he didn't even wait. He just crossed the Jordan. He just wades right into it. This is the kind of guy he is. And he's got all these men with him. They love to fight. They just wade through that river and they just get over there, and 700 charioteers, 40,000 horsemen. They didn't even talk about the people on foot. They just mow them down. And when it was all over, the Syrians that were left said, we don't want to help you anymore. Let's just make peace with these Israelites, okay? That's what we really want to do. And man, when you insult David, you are in big, big trouble. Remember when Nabal, David sent a couple of his servants because they were shearing sheep, and David had been protecting the herds. He thought maybe Nabal would give him some, refreshments, give him some supplies, and Nabal sent those guys packing. And if it hadn't have been for Abigail, he'd have been dead. And as it was, when Abigail said, man, you came really close to dying, he went into cardiac arrest and died anyways. Okay. David is just carving up. But what, and I wished I had a map. He first of all, the Philistines aren't even mentioned anymore. He's beaten them so many times, just like a rented mule. That he goes up the side of the Mediterranean, be the west side of Palestine. And when he conquers all of that, there was a major trade route that came right down along the Mediterranean. And why not? Ships would come in to port, unload their cargo, and see, then these trade routes would take them down Africa, Egypt, and so forth. The other one was called the King's Highway, and that came out of Mesopotamia, and that came right down on the other side of the Jordan River, and David had control of that. He had control not just of the land, but of the trade routes, the two major trade routes at that time. And that's what made him so powerful. So powerful. Chapter 11. David was called a man after God's own heart, but that title was never used again after Bathsheba. And he had reached a pinnacle personally. There wasn't anything else to conquer. And he was so strong, so mighty, historians figured that he had probably somewhere between 7 to 10 wives and more than concubines than that. And most of those were political because it strengthened his land holdings. These kings would give their daughters to David in exchange for... Have you seen Rachel lately? Yeah, she's married to the king. Never had to say his name, just married to the king. Wow, you must be so proud. I am proud. She's beautiful. He knows it. He didn't care. He was just... So, let's begin. Marilee. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that a couple weeks ago. Sorry. Haven't been able to sleep since. Would you read verses 1 through 5?
Then it happened in the spring, at the time when kings go out to battle, that David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel, and they destroyed the sons of Ammon and besieged Rabbah. But David stayed at Jerusalem. Now when evening came, David arose from his bed and walked around on the roof of the king's house. And from the roof he saw a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful in appearance. So David sent and inquired about the woman, and one said, "Is this not Bathsheba, the daughter of Elam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite?" David sent messengers and took her, and when she came to him, he lay with her. And when she had purified herself from her uncleanliness, she returned to her house. The woman conceived, and she sent and told David and said, "I am pregnant."
The fact that they give all of these names affiliated with Bathsheba Ilium is associated with Ahithophel, who was one of the smartest men in Israel. He would prophesy and it would come true. And he was working for a time for Absalom as a revenge factor because of what happens with his granddaughter. And Any idea why it says in verse 1 of chapter 11, spring was when the kings go out to battle? What'd they take the winter off for? Go to Florida? You get a comment? No. Oh, I thought you were, don't go to an auction. Go to Florida. I got it. I now know. I know you. Too muddy for chariots. Yeah, winter's a horrible time to fight. Yeah. It's just, the weather isn't conducive for chariots, for marching. You slosh around. I mean, it's just icky. Well, yeah, I mean, all the other times when they were going to fight, I mean, David loved to fight. And don't know if he's getting old, don't know if he was getting soft, but he wasn't where he was supposed to be. In that verse 1 of chapter 11, the bells and whistles start going off, but David stayed at Jerusalem. Now, palace, highest building in the area. So, when David's walking around on the roof, lots of times people with means, because, you know, there's no air conditioning, so they would spend a lot of time on the roof of their homes. Well, this is the spring. Yeah, this is springtime. So, was David's mistake walking around on the roof? No. And when he happened to look over and saw a woman bathing, what should he have done? Yeah, look away. I love that part about he saw a woman and she was beautiful. Now, how would you know that unless you were staring? I mean, just quick glance. Oh, there's a leap. Oh, we're going to blame her. I get it. I get it. You know, let me go here. Yeah. And
You're supposed to do it then according to Deuteronomy, and then also it can't be after she's pregnant. So how long was she there?
Okay. Anyhow. I've got so many notes here, just a second. Verse 3, who do you suppose he sent? Any ideas?
Female servant?
A servant of some type.
So the man said,
And one of the things we've learned so far through the Old Testament is who knows the most gossip in the palace? Servants. David? I mean, he's just not thinking. As soon as he sent a servant, everybody knew. I'm telling you, as soon as he sent that servant, everybody knew what David was doing. And yet he thinks it's a secret. Very stupid. Yeah, trusting. So, Uriah was one of the 30. Not just in his army. Uriah was one of those special men. And man, his world was rocked by verse 5. Everything that he had built, everything that he'd hoped for, it takes years to build a reputation. It can be destroyed in minutes. And that's what's happened. So, let's read. We better go to the back because I know Holly's just waiting. Would you read verses 6 through 13, please?
Then David said to Joab, saying, "Send me Uriah the Hittite." So Joab sent Uriah to David. When Uriah came to him, David asked concerning the welfare of Joab and the people and the state of the war. Then David said to Uriah, "Go down to your house and wash your feet." And Uriah went out of the king's house, and a present from the king was sent out after him. But Uriah slept at the door of the king's house with all the servants of his lord, and did not go down to his house. Now when they told David, saying, "Uriah did not go down to his house," David said to Uriah, "Have you not come from a journey? Why did you not go down to your house?" Uriah said to David, "The ark and Israel and Judah are staying in temporary shelters, and my lord Joab and the servants of my lord are camping in the open field. Shall I then go to my house to eat and to drink and to lie with my wife? By your life and the life of your soul, I will not do this thing." Then David said to Uriah, "Stay here today also, and tomorrow I will let you go." So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the next. Now David called him, and he ate and drank before him, and he made him drunk. And in the evening he went out to lie on his bed with the Lord's servants, but he did not go down to his house.
Thank you. Turn over to 1 Samuel 21. And Jojo, would you read verses 1 through 6?
Sure. Then David came to Nob to Amalek, the priest, and Amalek came trembling to meet David and said to him, "Why are you alone and no one with you?" David said to Amalek, the priest, "The king has commissioned me with a matter and has said to me, 'Let no one know anything about the matter on which I am sending you, and with which I have commissioned you. And I have directed the young men to a certain place. Now therefore, what do you have on hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread, and whatever can be found." The priest answered David and said, "There is no ordinary bread on hand, but there is the consecrated bread, if only the young men have kept themselves from women." David answered the priest and said to him, "Surely women have been kept from us, as previously when I set out, and the vessels of the young men were holy. Though it was an ordinary journey, how much more then today will their vessels be holy?" So the priest gave him the consecrated bread, For there was no bread there but the bread of the presence, which was removed from before the Lord in order to put hot bread in its place when it was taken away.
Saul's after David, and he is trying to run away. And he gets to does it tell you? Yeah, he gets to Nob. Ahimelech the priest is there, and he's lying, but one of the things that was just true of Israelites before they would go to war, they didn't have any relations with their wives. They just to try and keep themselves holy because they were fighting for God. David knows that. David practiced that. That's what he tells Ahimelech. He says, of course we haven't had any sex. We're going on orders from God, so that's not a part of it. But notice what happens when Uriah comes home. In verse 8, David commands Uriah to do what? Go home and sleep with your wife. Wait a minute, Dave. You know that's not going to happen. Every soldier refrained from sex. So he's at a loss. They said, David didn't go down, or Uriah didn't go down. He slept right outside your door. So when David asks him, what's Uriah's answer? Because, everybody else is fighting, Dave. We're consecrated to God. This is a battle. I'm not going to go down there. Nobody else is down there. I mean, we just don't do that. So, what does he try to do in verse 13? Get him drunk. And what does he hope to accomplish by getting him drunk? Yeah. Drunken rage, go home, rape his wife, and then David's free. How much in love with Bathsheba can David be? None. Not at all. You see how he's sliding? Powerful thing. Yeah. And he is just losing his grip. That's just a horrible, horrible thing. So that's not working. That's not working. So he tried deceit. Now he's going to deceive. Kim. Nice. 14 through 21, big boy.
One morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it by the hand of Uriah. He had written in the letter saying, "Place Uriah in the front line of the fiercest battle and withdraw from him, so that he may be struck down and die." So it was as Joab kept watch on the city that he put Uriah at the place where he knew there were valiant men. The men of the city went out and fought against Joab, and some of the people among David's servants fell, and Uriah the Hittite also died. Then Joab sent and reported to David all the events of the war. He charged the messenger, saying, "When you have finished telling all the events of the war to the king, and if it happens that the king's wrath rises and he says to you, 'Why did you go so near to the city to fight? Did you not know that they would shoot from the wall? Who struck down Abimelech, the son of Jerubisheth? Did not a woman throw an upper millstone on him from the wall so that he died at Kadesh? Why did you go near the wall? Then you shall say, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also.
What is one of the saddest parts about verse 14? Yeah. Instead, what did he do? Yeah.
Lead into the Spirit, into Christ, and the God understanding, he chose the other.
Well, didn't he give the letter to this guy who asked, asking to have him killed?
I got a letter here. I got a letter here that says, I want Uriah murdered.
Yes, sir.
And I give it to who? Give it to Uriah. What does that tell you about what David thought of Uriah? Faithful.
They couldn't read.
I need that.
Sorry.
Do you see the tragedy of that? He trusts Uriah not to look at that letter. Wouldn't matter. But Uriah was such a trusted servant, David knew he'd never read that. And it had his name and what was going to happen to him. And he delivered it. Wow. This whole thing is just unbelievable. Okay, we're going to quit right there.